They're not being nice to you. They're studying you. Every smile, every compliment, every just checking in, it's not kindness. It's reconnaissance. Manipulators don't attack like enemies. They invade like friends. They praise you just enough to make you lower your guard. They ask just enough questions to map your emotional pressure points. And when the moment is right, they strike without raising their voice, without breaking a sweat. You won't even realize it's happening until you've already lost the battle. This world doesn't reward good intentions. It rewards strategy. And if you're still navigating life with honesty, openness, and blind trust, you're not surviving. You're supplying the ammunition your enemies will use against you. You think they're watching you because they admire you. No. They're watching you because they smell weakness. And weakness in the game of psychological power is currency. It's data. It's leverage. Machiavelli said it best: a man who strives to be entirely good will inevitably come to ruin among the many who are not good. Translation: if you want to stay safe, you need to understand the game. But if you want to win, you need to play it better than everyone else. This isn't a motivational video. This is your playbook for psychological warfare, a blueprint for reclaiming control in a world built on emotional manipulation, toxic power dynamics, and silent domination. From this point on, you don't react, you calculate. You don't justify, you observe. You don't chase approval, you control the room. This is how you outsmart toxic people. This is how you become unreadable. This is how you become untouchable. Let the game begin. You've been manipulated more times than you can count, but you called it love, respect, or just being polite. That's the trick. Emotional manipulation never enters your life dressed like a villain. It walks in smiling. It speaks softly. It compliments you. It asks how you're feeling. And in return, it takes a little more of your time, a little more of your self-respect, a little more of your ability to say no, until one day you realize you don't recognize yourself anymore. Most people are so busy being liked, being polite, being agreeable that they never stop to ask, am I actually safe around this person? Or am I just trained not to question them? Manipulators thrive in that silence. They depend on your good intentions, your desire to keep the peace, your instinct to explain yourself. They weaponize guilt, create invisible power dynamics, and slowly tighten their grip. And the entire time you think you're the one being difficult. Machiavelli warned us, men are so simple and so obedient to present necessities that he who deceives will always find someone who will let himself be deceived. That someone is often you until now. What you're about to learn isn't therapy. It's not self-help. It's strategy. It's a cold, ruthless guide to spotting emotional predators before they get close and dismantling their influence without ever raising your voice. From the first manipulative joke to the last desperate guilt trip, you'll be untouchable. This is psychological warfare, and it starts with recognizing how invisible the war really is. You're not being hit. You're being drained. You're not being yelled at. You're being guilted. You're not being forced. You're being guided into compliance, one harmless request at a time. And here's the truth. Nobody wants to say most manipulators are not strangers. They're people you know, people who smile at you, people you've forgiven too many times, the coworker who always takes credit but never blame, the partner who turns every no into a guilt trip, the friend who only shows up when they need something and disappears when you do. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. This video will hand you 7 Machiavellian tactics to outsmart toxic people before they tighten the leash. You'll learn how to spot power plays hidden in compliments, how to destroy control tactics using silence, how to flip every emotional trap back onto the one who set it, and most of all, how to become unreadable, unshakable, and undeniably in control. Because in a world full of emotional predators, you don't win by being the nicest person in the room. You win by being the one they can't predict. The first manipulator in your life wasn't a stranger. It was someone who smiled while pulling strings. That's what makes emotional manipulation so effective. It hides behind things that look harmless. A joke, a compliment, a favor. You don't feel attacked. You feel obligated. You feel off balance. You feel like something is wrong, but you can't prove it. That's exactly how they want you. Manipulators don't use force. They use confusion. They create small moments where you question your own reaction. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe I'm too sensitive. They don't insult you outright. They embed it in humor. They don't control you openly. They just make you feel guilty when you say no. And the moment you start explaining yourself, you've already surrendered control. This is the first stage of psychological warfare. They move, you react, they confuse, you clarify, they withdraw, you chase. That imbalance becomes the pattern. And the longer it continues, the more you lose your center. You no longer know what's reasonable. You no longer feel confident saying no without apology. But here's where everything shifts. The second you recognize the pattern, you gain your first weapon. And that weapon is called the mirror defense. Most people try to fight manipulation by proving something. They explain, they justify, they defend their feelings. But manipulators feed on that. They want you emotional. They want you predictable. They want you exposed. The mirror defense gives them nothing. It flips the dynamic. You don't react. You reflect. When someone asks a loaded question, you return it. Them, why are you being distant? You, why do you think I am? When someone jabs you with sarcasm and waits for a meltdown, you don't laugh. You don't correct. You say interesting, and you let the silence stretch. That's when the game begins to break, because manipulators depend on asymmetry. They act. You respond. But when you mirror instead of engage, they become unsure. Their power starts slipping. They don't know what you're thinking, and that alone is terrifying. In real life, this doesn't look dramatic. It looks like calm. It looks like poise. It looks like not flinching when they expect you to, and that subtle refusal to give them emotional leverage. It's the beginning of psychological control. Here's what you need to remember. You're not here to win an argument. You're here to end the pattern. And the fastest way to do that is to show them exactly what they look like without a single raised voice. You become the mirror. And most people can't stand seeing their own reflection. This is where the game turns. At first, the manipulator pokes. They test you. Small jokes, passive jabs, delayed responses. But once they see you react, once they realize your emotions are accessible, they escalate. And you feel it. You start doubting yourself. You over-explain simple decisions. You hesitate before replying to messages. You rehearse what you'll say to avoid misunderstandings. And slowly, silently, you become a prisoner inside your own nervous system. That's when the emotion vacuum becomes your next line of defense. Because the manipulator's greatest weapon is not what they say, it's what you feel. They want to pull you into an emotional cage, one where you feel obligated to defend, to fix, to smooth over every moment of tension. And once you're inside that cage, they control the game. They make a subtle dig. You laugh awkwardly. They ghost you for 2 days. You panic and double text. They guilt trip you. You defend your innocence like you're on trial. And just like that, your energy is no longer yours. Your attention is rented. Your peace is purchased by them. But here's where you change the script. You stop reacting, not with anger, not with sarcasm, not even with a smile. You respond with nothing. Strategic silence is not passive. It is a psychological chokehold. Because manipulators expect you to chase. When you don't, they spiral. They need reaction to survive, and your stillness is starvation. They say something cruel masked as a joke. You stare, calm, flat. They try to bait you with guilt. You blink slowly, say nothing. They rant to get a rise. You breathe, and let the silence do the work. That silence becomes unbearable for them, because silence can't be argued with. It doesn't flinch. It doesn't confess. It doesn't give them anything to push against. It creates a vacuum, and in that vacuum, their games collapse. This tactic doesn't make you numb. It makes you dangerous. You're not suppressing your emotions. You're controlling where they land. You feel everything, but they get nothing. And here's the truth. They don't want you to know the person who controls the pace controls the power. The manipulator thrives on urgency. Answer now. Talk to me. Fix this. Because when you move fast, you stop thinking. But when you pause, you start noticing. You notice the pattern, the pressure, the setup. You become surgical. And when you slow the game down, they can't keep up. This silence, this void becomes your armor, not to hide, but to dominate. Because nothing makes a manipulator more unstable than someone who doesn't flinch. You're not cold, you're composed, you're not passive, you're powerful. And from this moment on, you speak with your absence. What if I told you that every compliment you ever received might have been a setup, that the "you're amazing," the "no one does it like you," the "you're the only one I can count on" were never about you at all. They were about control. And worse, you probably thanked them for it. This is the psychological trap no one talks about. Manipulators don't just use criticism, they use praise. Because flattery triggers something deeper than approval. It triggers identity. The second you hear, "You're so dependable," your brain says, "I need to keep being dependable." The moment someone calls you the strong one, you feel guilty ever falling apart. That's how they build the cage. Not by force, but by praise. And if that doesn't work, they switch masks. Suddenly you owe them. "After everything I've done for you, I just thought you'd be there for me." Now you're not just chasing approval, you're paying off invisible debt. And the moment you push back, you feel like the villain in your own story. This is the dual weapon of emotional control, praise and guilt. One pulls your ego, the other strangles your conscience, and both make you forget who you are. But here's where it gets darker. Because it's not just manipulation, it's conditioning. You're being trained, like a dog responding to treats. Compliment, perform. Guilt, obey. And just like that, your entire sense of self becomes programmable by someone else's reaction. This is why the next tactic hits harder than all the rest: reward reversal. You stop chasing approval. You stop rewarding guilt. You become the one who controls validation. Not with cruelty, but with precision. They say you're so good at this. You nod. Say nothing. Change the subject. They say you'd really let me down if you don't help. You respond, "Not this time," and walk away. No apology, no defense, no emotional drop, just stillness. That's when the spell breaks. Because manipulators don't need love. They need reaction. And when you starve their reward loop, they crumble. In real life, this could look like a coworker taking credit for your work, expecting you to explode or shrink. Instead, you praise someone else in the room. You steal the spotlight without confrontation. You move power by redirecting validation, and they can feel it like oxygen being cut off in real time. You're no longer the person waiting to be praised. You are the one who decides who gets seen, who gets heard, and who gets nothing. That is domination without drama. That is Machiavellian control. And once you learn to weaponize silence, withdrawal, and indifference, you will never be emotionally owned again. What happens after you stop reacting, after the silence, after the mirror, after the validation disappears and the cage starts collapsing? What's left? The wreckage. Not theirs, yours. The truth is, when you strip away manipulation, you don't just expose them. You expose the parts of yourself that allowed it. The need to be liked. The fear of being called selfish. The guilt of choosing yourself. And it hurts. Not like a punch. Like a realization. How long have I been performing for approval that was never real? How many apologies did I make just to survive someone's mood swings? This is where the scars show up. Not on your skin, but in your memory. Flashbacks of moments that felt off, but you laughed through anyway. Conversations where your voice got smaller. People you called friends who only stayed when you were useful. This is the psychological fallout, and most people never talk about it because it's invisible. But here's what makes it worse. Even after you break free, you'll still hear their voice in your head, doubting you, questioning your tone, whispering guilt every time you choose silence over explanation. That's what emotional manipulation does. It builds an internal warden. One that polices your every word, even when the manipulator is gone. And this is where your power must evolve. You don't just cut ties, you cut conditioning. You don't just ghost people, you ghost the parts of yourself that clung to being accepted. You don't just walk away, you walk into a version of yourself that no longer needs to be understood to feel strong. Because here's the brutal truth: they never respected you. They calculated you. They tested how far you'd bend before you'd break, and every time you gave them one more inch, they measured your weakness. But now your silence isn't confusion. It's clarity. Your distance isn't coldness. It's discipline. And when they try again, because they always try again, they won't find the person they used to manipulate. They'll find a presence they can't read, a calm that doesn't negotiate, a ghost with memory precision and zero need for closure. This is the aftermath that creates legends. The moment you stop defending your worth and start proving that your peace is non-negotiable. Not with anger, not with revenge, just with absence. Because the most terrifying thing to someone who once controlled you is learning they no longer have access. The most powerful move you'll ever make is walking away like nothing was ever owed. No warning, no explanation, no emotional goodbye, just absence surgical calculated complete. This is the exit threat. And it's not a tactic, it's a transformation. Because here's what manipulators never expect: that you'll stop needing them. That you'll stop explaining, stop defending, stop proving. That one day you'll look at the whole game and realize you never had to play it. They think they own you because they've invested time. They've tested you. They know your emotional patterns. But all of that power dies the moment you detach for real. Not pretend detachment. Not cold shoulder games. I mean silent, irreversible self-reclamation. You don't text back. You don't argue. You don't update. You disappear with your value, with your calm, and with zero trace of emotional residue. And that silence, that vacuum, it doesn't hurt them. It haunts them. Because the exit threat isn't just about leaving. It's about making them realize they were never needed. That's what destroys them. They don't panic because you yelled. They panic because you smiled and left everything burning and never looked back. They panic because the control they held only existed inside your compliance. Now that you've left, they're left with something worse than defeat: irrelevance. And here's what they don't want you to know. The fear of losing you is stronger than any love they ever claim to feel. Manipulators don't love you. They love owning your reactions. When you're gone and you give them nothing, not even closure, their power collapses. This is where you take back everything. Not by screaming, not by proving, just by letting them feel the full weight of your absence. Because nothing says I win like walking away from chaos with clean hands. In real life, this looks like declining the meeting, blocking the number, changing the locks, changing the tone, saying, "No, I'm done," and not flinching when they beg for one more chance. You don't come back. You don't need closure. You were the closure. That's the part they never recover from. Because the most terrifying person in the room isn't the one who fights. It's the one who doesn't need to. The one who makes their absence louder than anyone else's presence. The one who could stay and destroy but chooses to disappear instead. That's not weakness. That's finality. And finality is the one thing a manipulator can't rewrite. The smartest person in the room often looks like the most oblivious one. Not because they're weak, but because they've stopped needing to prove how strong they are. This is the final strategy. The one that doesn't just protect you, it makes you untouchable. Not through domination, but through invisibility. Because manipulators expect conflict. They expect resistance. They want you to push back so they can push harder. But when you give them nothing, when you nod, smile faintly, and walk away, they don't know what just happened. That's the art of playing dumb. It's not ignorance. It's tactical unreadability. You see the setup, you read the room, you smell the trap. But instead of confronting it, you pretend you never noticed. And while they think they're winning, you're watching every move, documenting every pattern, and calculating the moment that will end them. Real power doesn't interrupt. It observes. It waits. It lets the enemy hang themselves with their own rope. You let the narcissist think you're falling for the flattery. You let the manipulator believe you didn't catch the jab. You act like you're too soft to strike until it no longer matters. Then one day, they find themselves exposed, alone, no warning, no sign, just silence where your loyalty used to be. And when they ask what happened, you shrug. I was just watching. This tactic leaves no fingerprints, no explosions, just confusion. And confusion is what breaks people faster than any argument. Because here's the truth: you don't destroy a manipulator by proving them wrong. You destroy them by making them think they were never right to begin with. You kill the game by pretending it didn't even exist, and that drives them insane. The exit isn't loud, it's surgical. The revenge isn't emotional, it's psychological. They wanted chaos. You gave them calm. They wanted dominance. You gave them disinterest. That's what breaks their reality. You're not passive. You're precise. You're not silent because you're scared. You're silent because you've already won. They will replay the last conversation 1,000 times trying to find the mistake. They will reread the last message searching for clues. They will sit in rooms you used to occupy wondering why your absence feels louder than your presence ever did. That's what happens when you become unreadable, untrackable, untouchable. And here's the final twist: you're no longer playing the game. You are the game. You don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need to fight to win. And you don't need to explain yourself to anyone who benefits from your confusion. The truth is simple, but hard to swallow. Most of what hurt you wasn't violent, it was invisible. It was the guilt you felt for setting boundaries, the exhaustion from over-explaining, the shame for choosing yourself. And now, that ends. Because silence is no longer your weakness, it's your shield. Detachment is no longer avoidance, it's intelligence. And walking away isn't quitting. It's reclaiming everything they once convinced you to hand over. Let them guess. Let them spiral. Let them sit in the storm they once thought they controlled. You owe no final words, no grand exit. Just your absence, your peace, your power. If something in this video made you pause, rethink a relationship, or remember who you used to be before they rewired, you drop a comment below. Tell us, what moment in your life made you realize someone had power over you they didn't deserve? Save this video. Rewatch it when you start doubting yourself again. Subscribe so you don't forget what it sounds like when someone tells you the truth without sugarcoating it. And if you know someone who needs to wake up, send this to them. Quietly. No explanation needed. Because some of us aren't here to be liked. We're here to be clear, to be calm, to be unreadable. Power isn't loud. It just walks out and never looks back.